Welcome to the Illuminate Recovery podcast. We shed light on mental health issues, mental illness, and addiction recovery, ways to cope, manage, and inspire. Beyond the self-care we will discuss, you may need the help of a licensed professional. My name's Kurt Neider. I'm a husband, father, entrepreneur, a handyman, and a student of life. I avoid conflict, I deflect with humor, and I'm fascinated by the human experience.
And I'm Shelley Mangum. I am a clinical mental health counselor, and my favorite role of all times is grandma. I am a seeker of truth, and I feel like life should be approached with tremendous curiosity.
I ask the dumb questions.
I fill in the gaps.
The Illuminate Recovery podcast is brought to you by Illuminate Billing Advocates. Make billing and collection simple with leader in substance abuse and mental health billing services. Verification and analysis of benefits, pre-authorizations, utilization management, accurate claim submission and management, denial and appeal management, and industry-leading reporting. Improve your practice's cash flow and your ability to help your clients with Illuminate Billing Advocates.
Today we have Parker Smith with us. Parker is the CEO of PJS Connection Consulting. He's in Phoenix, Arizona. And here I'm just going to quote Parker to introduce him. My life's purpose is to help increase the impact others have on their community and our population as a whole. I am deeply passionate about leadership, mentorship, public speaking, relationship building, as well as health and wellness. I am committed to living a life in service of others. Parker, thanks for being with Kurt and I today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's a pretty passionate, pretty powerful statement that you've shared. I'm curious, and I love some of the things you've said in there, like you're committed to living a life in service of others. So I'll probably ask you about that in a little bit. But before that, it might be a good idea to just maybe introduce yourself a little bit, talk about some of your history and how you ended up with PJS.
Certainly. So I'm Parker Smith, grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and spent the first 18 years of my life there. And my path took me to Denver, Colorado for undergraduate university studies, to a small school called Regis University. Loved the education that I received there, loved the state of Colorado, ended up sticking around there for 10 years before moving back to Phoenix a couple years ago. And what really brought me towards this line of work was the experience I had in undergraduate school with a handful of my best friends who quickly fell through into the throes of heroin addiction. So a handful of them started using every day in the house that we lived in. I had no idea how to help them. I had no idea what to do. I felt quite powerless to the situation. And unfortunately, it continued to escalate. One of those individuals went on to overdose and pass away. And I always wanted to help others. I always felt like I was good with connecting with other people, and that people gave me energy and helping people gave me energy. And so I decided to pursue a credential following graduation called the Certified Addiction Counselor certification. So there's different levels of that in the state of Colorado. They just updated it. It used to be the CAC 1, CAC 2, CAC 3. I earned the CAC 2, kind of qualifies me as a clinician. Now the credential is titled the Certified Addiction Specialist. So I come from the counseling side initially. After college, shortly after college, I got in with a organization in Boulder, Colorado called North Star Transitions. I was the third full-time employee there. And initially we were a recovery coaching, life skills counseling program, working with young adults who suffered with addiction and mental health issues. And we really helped them to engage with the community, do some care coordination with providers, but also just help them with life stuff, getting back in school, filling out application, building a resume. So I really enjoyed getting to work directly with the individuals. But I also realized fairly quickly that I enjoyed the operational and administrative side as well. And so that organization grew rapidly. We added an IOP, PHP, and then we were actually the first state licensed residential treatment center in the city of Boulder. And that organization still stands tall today with multiple residential facilities, multiple sober living homes, and a consolidated 10,000 square foot office where the PHP, IOP services are delivered. So that organization grew from 3 employees to 75 within 5 years. And like I said, is doing super well. So I'm very blessed with that experience. I was recovery coach, and then I was the program coordinator, and then I was the director of operations. So in that role, I managed all of our regulatory compliance. Our state licensure went on to earn the Joint Commission accreditation. And for whatever reason, that seemed to be an area that I was highly skilled. We, performed extremely well in Joint Commission. We're told it was kind of one of the better surveys that they had ever seen. And the state of Colorado requested some of the policies and procedures that I wrote to duplicate and use in some of their state funded programs. So a couple sources of validation there for me. And a few years back, I recognized, regulation was increasing. Different stakeholders in the industry, the government, consumers, the insurance payers were looking to, better regulate the industry and understand, what is quality care. And one of the ways that they have attempted to do so is by, demanding accreditation in order to be reimbursed for services. So I saw that opportunity. I recognized that I had the ability. Entrepreneurship runs in my blood, my lineage. I just love being a business owner. I love, the freedom with decision making, with time management. And so I've been abundantly blessed after taking that leap of faith. Many thought that was not the best decision for me to leave a COO job and give it a run. But, it's one of the better decisions that I've made in my life. And like I said, been really blessed to get where I'm at. So my organization mainly works with behavioral health care providers, mental health, substance abuse treatment, individuals with intellectual disabilities. And we help these organizations to earn their licenses with their respective state, but also accreditations such as Joint Commission and CARF. And we really, seek to inspire these organizations rather than seeing regulation and, accreditation as a necessary evil, which I think is oftentimes the view. Trying to inspire the why behind it. It wasn't just random folks that wrote these laws and rules and regulations. It's doctors, it's clinicians, physicians. And so there's intentions behind these rules and regulations. And so what I try to, really educate people on is that if you implement and embody and embrace these standards, the return on investment is impossible to calculate, and because it's so great. The quality of the services will increase. The standing with payers will remain. You'll have opportunities, to go and network, or it just opens a lot of different doors for an organization. And rather than see it as something that they have to do, we try to help them understand that it's something that they get to do to become better. And yeah, it involves a little bit more work for everybody. But what we see is the employees of the organizations, really appreciate adding some of these measures. And a lot of this, content in the standards is maybe stuff you never would have thought about, and you implement it and you're like, wow, we're glad that we do that now. We never would have thought about that. And that's helped prevent some bad things from happening down the line. So,
well, Parker, you talk about it like this is just what you have to do, and everybody's going to understand that this is what you have to do, right? Like if a facility wants to be successful, they've got to get accredited and they need to do all these things. But that's not my experience. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and you've got to go, look, this is why you want this, right? This is why we're going to do all of this stuff. And it might not generate you, well, it will generate you more revenue because you'll be able to accept more policies, but it's going to keep you from losing an awful lot of revenue because those insurance companies are very good at taking money back or going and finding money that they think they can take back from you. And if you don't put these things in place, that's where those insurance takebacks come in.
Absolutely. Those are kind of the more commonly recognized reasons for accreditation. I think some of the, foundational elements of accreditation that I appreciate is really, there's these 15 chapters, covers every area of the business. Performance improvement and leadership chapters really address, the responsibility of leadership to be able to, foster this culture of safety, support all the individuals in the organization. And, as a service-based business, your people are your greatest asset. And so being able to support them, at the leadership level is really going to blossom out in, through every branch. And then performance improvement, we were talking before the show, I don't believe anything really stays the same. I think that, either it's improving or it's going in the wrong direction. And so when you put a quality improvement plan together, where you're collecting data, you're reporting it, aggregating it, looking at it objectively to make, informed decisions about changes, then you're really committing to becoming a, world-class program. And I think most aspire to be that, and very few are really able to pull it off. So,
well, and I think it's interesting too, Parker, is that as a facility, let's say you're doing substance abuse, I don't think it's really possible for you to see what the insurance companies are saying about your organization. But those insurance companies are certainly keeping a scorecard on the facilities that they're working with. And they're saying, yeah, they're seeing the doctor every week, or they're seeing a therapist twice a week, or they're doing outcome measures, or, all of the different things. They're paying attention to that. And so it really does, if you do a better program in these back areas that you're talking about, it shows up and insurance companies are taking note. So I couldn't agree with you more, but if I'm tight on money, I'm going to tell you to take a walk because I don't want to hear what you have to say. I'm just trying to get people treatment. So it's an interesting conflict there.
It is. And, there's a lot of different return on investment for, investing in services like mine or investing in accreditation. And, Joint Commission and CARF and, a lot of the other different players in the game have, they're pushing for this outcomes-based care, right? We're trying to understand what a successful treatment episode looks like. And the way I would define that is a treatment plan that was collaboratively developed with the individual in their own words that has been, successfully completed in terms of, their active goals and what they wanted to work on. But you can't, everyone is just so different in their unique experience. We're all a calculation of these many experiences that make us up over time. But when you put in some of these standardized assessment tools, whether it's the PHQ-9 or the Brief Addiction Monitor, and you're utilizing the results from these assessments to continue to update and drive treatment with an individual, now we're really talking about being more objective in the way that we treat people, in a way that really addresses the symptoms that they're exhibiting and either reduces those or, puts a plan in place to try to mitigate over time. So.
Yeah, I know I get asked this question quite frequently, and I don't know if I know the right answer, and maybe you can shed some light. But I often hear facilities ask, should I get JCAHO accredited or should I get CARF accredited? And this is fairly specific to substance abuse facilities. Do you have a preference?
I do. I think the Joint Commission is superior. And my reasoning is such. There's an element of customer service and consulting that you get from a Joint Commission surveyor that feels a little bit less like an audit, and I think adds an additional layer of value in the process, where they're helping to teach and educate and provide even resources in the form of documents and, templates. Whereas CARF, I think, is really addressed more in the form of an audit. Another reason is that Joint Commission, as you prepare and submit a ready date, they're going to come survey you within 30 to 60 days of that ready date. You can even do an early survey option where they come, and give you 7 days notice. They might come, a couple weeks after your ready date. And you don't have to show them this historical data. You just represent to them, these are the plans and systems that we put in place to be able to meet the standards. And then when they come back in 3 years, obviously they're going to want to see that stuff. CARF demands that you submit a ready date, and then they come 6 months following to be able to analyze what you've done since you've claimed to be ready for them. I think that there's also a misconception about cost. A lot of people, from what I've heard, say, "Oh, we're not going to do joint commission because it's more expensive." I don't believe that that's true, because it's a flat fee for the survey. Joint commissioning, it's about $3,300 now. Whereas CARF is a cost per surveyor per day, and they get to choose how many surveyors they send out. And so if you think about $1,500 per surveyor per day, 2 surveyors, 4 days, that's added up to a multiple of what the Joint Commission's survey cost was. So for the above reasons, Joint Commission is preferable. But for some organizations, maybe CARF does make more sense. And we can certainly help those folks as well. Nice.
Good information. One of the things that I heard you say as you were sharing your story is that when you were going to university, you were, in a room or in an apartment with all of these guys that are your friends, and they're using heroin. So it really pricked my attention is how does somebody associate with all of these people that they love and care about and spend time with and not end up using with them?
I think, it's a good question. Super, super blessed. I think that there's, at least a handful of angels that have been looking after me my whole life and being able to keep me from going down certain paths, that were, easily available for me to take. It escalated quickly with these folks. I think, most of them, if not all of them, had not really experienced use in the past before college. And so when they started using marijuana and drinking, it just escalated really quickly, as we know it can. One of the aspects that I think probably supported me was I was a student athlete in college. And so, I'm in school during the day. I'm at practice in the evenings, 7 days a week, traveling to tournaments and, waking up the next morning and finishing the homework that I couldn't get done the night before. And so, time management as a student athlete is very challenging. And to be able to be successful in school and your sport, you really need to be dedicated to, a routine that can't really include drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, but that's true. That's absolutely true. But you have to be pretty disciplined to say, I'm gonna stay the course. I'm gonna do this because this is more important to me. Because there's plenty of people that have been athletes that have taken the other option, right? And there's other dynamics behind it. Would you, can you maybe identify some of those other strengths that you may have that might be lacking somewhere else?
Sure. Yeah, I've always been a resilient person. I've always been a determined person. And, I think those are some qualities that have taken me through life and helped me be successful in a number of ways. I'm certainly not afraid of hard work. Putting in that work is such to me, important component of living a happy and successful life. And it's the way that we look at our work, and our work takes a lot of different forms. It's not just our job. It's the way that we take care of our body. It's the way that we take care of our relationships. It's the way that we take care of our home. It's multifaceted, work to me. I think it's a loaded word, and I take a lot of pride in my work and what I do. And I think that that's certainly a source of motivation and drive for me. I think an additional contributing factor is that, my family had some very humble beginnings. There was a period of time where we didn't have a house. We lived with, different families in our church. And so, my parents have worked and sacrificed a lot to provide for us and give us the opportunity to be successful. And I would be, remiss if I didn't, put forth 110% in everything I do, to be able to live out the dream that they wanted to provide for me and my brothers. So
that's incredible. And you talked about coming from a long line of entrepreneurs. Talk about a little bit what that looked like in your own home, and then, what that looked like, from your ancestors.
For sure. The being in service of others definitely is, I think, part of my family legacy. My great grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, my grandfather, my father, all the way down to me is just really, we just believe in caring for others and, being a good steward and helping others when they need it and making those sacrifices for other people. And then, business, entrepreneurship. So my father was, an aspiring golf professional, played at University of Colorado, won the Colorado State Amateur, pursued the professional circuit with golf, which is very difficult to be successful in. And as a young family, he had to make a decision where he decided to leave playing professional and became a teaching professional. So becoming a teaching professional, unless you work for some sort of organization, is very much entrepreneurship. You need to find, opportunities to run camps. And so he would work 5 days a week at ASU Karsten and then drive up Saturday, Sunday and run camps, in Prescott every weekend. And I watched that. I participated in that. And eventually that gave my mom the opportunity to go back to school. She got her degree in counseling. My mother is actually a marriage, family, and addictions therapist in private practice here in Phoenix, Living Hope Counseling. And, her business now thrives. She's got about 6 clinicians that work under her with a variable set of skills and experience. And so, both my parents are business owners, aunts, uncles, business owners. And I think that my family recognizes and appreciates, business ownership as the opportunity to live life in the way that you want, not on a set schedule, where you're asking for time off and where you're, having to kind of navigate this bureaucratic process in a way that serves you. We believe in being able to capitalize on the, effort that we put in. And, you work harder, you do better. And I like that reward system. And so hopefully that helps kind of color in the lines a little bit.
Well, it does. And it's interesting to hear what your family is like. And I imagine people who have, who are in recovery or who, struggle with severe mental illness and things like that, maybe they feel a little bit of resentment if they haven't done enough of their work. That, well, look, Parker had this great life. Of course he didn't choose drugs because, he had this great family life and he learned how to work hard and he learned how to sacrifice. But it sounds like there's an awful lot of elements there that supported you and kept you focused on the things that were important to you.
Absolutely. And, my life has certainly not gone without mistakes. I think that my challenges, like with, bad behaviors and drugs and alcohol, kind of came through in high school. And I was in an environment that was able to support me through that. And I'm actually really grateful for having those challenges more early on in my life and learning from them and getting, feedback from the world about, what the consequences of that can be. And so as I moved into my own, independent state outside of where I grew up, I felt more capable of making better decisions. Whereas I think some folks we see come to college, haven't been exposed to a whole lot or made a whole lot of poor judgment calls that, have been introduced to a new set of freedom that gives them that ability where the unseen consequences start to pop up and it can snowball quickly.
That's for sure, doesn't it? Well, and and maybe you've dabbled and done some drinking and things like that, but certainly those who have that addictive gene or addictive pieces inside of them, it has a very different way of responding in the body, and they don't always get that choice. So I do want to say
you're right. I agree completely. Yeah, I think some people really kind of get the short end of the stick, and in the assessment stage of treatment, biopsychosocial, comprehensive diagnostic assessment or multidimensional assessment. It's called a lot of different things, but it really addresses these important factors that help shape us as human beings, right? Our biological makeup, our psychological makeup, and our socialization. And for some of those folks, like you had described, the biology and the genetics within them really just predisposes them to this condition. And then also, there's these other factors too, right? Our psychology and, the way that we're socialized, where we grew up. Traumatic experiences certainly can exacerbate use and, be a springboard for addiction. So I agree with you completely that, although for me personally, it didn't catch fire. It certainly can be something that people with all the best intentions and, all the best support just are going to struggle with, unfortunately.
Parker, you seem to me like, and I couldn't agree more. I appreciate that validation. Is that we all come a little bit different, and we've got to own who we are and be proud of who we are, and even those weaknesses and challenges that we have. As I'm listening to you kind of share your story and talk about the details, right? You're into the details of JACO and CARF and all of these. Like, you're the guy that reads all of the small print. I'm pretty sure you're the guy that reads all of that. And so I'm wondering how you keep balance in your life, because I imagine you could sit there and read for 12 hours a day and never get enough of it. How do you maintain balance in your life?
I think it's just a consistent, taking inventory, right? I think as a business owner, one of the bigger challenges is, do I get help and pay for it, or do I learn this myself and do it? And I think over time, you really have to learn, which, bucket the work should go into, right? And early on, it really has to fall on you, and you got to find those answers. And as you continue to experience success, you have more resources to be able to pull people in. I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't have the balance that I do without some really wonderful people in my life to help, check up on that inventory and, advise me. I think, there's a lot of greatness in wise counsel. And so I keep a lot of that around me to help keep balanced and understand where I should be putting my priorities. I think also, having a routine is just really important. I have a yoga practice. I love cycling. I love playing golf, and, having those, recreational and physical exercise, hobbies and routines, I think really supports balance and structure, and kind of helps to manage some of the challenges, but also bring clarity, in how one organizes their life. And so, I wish I had a, crystal ball to guide the path for how I can stay balanced. But the best answer that I could give is just to continue to revisit, check in with myself, be honest with myself about, where I'm balanced and where I'm not, and, what are some of the things that I can do to get back to it. And I don't think any of us ever stay balanced all the time. It's just a matter of when we can recognize having that self-awareness to say, ooh, I'm falling this way or I'm falling that way. How can I kind of get back to that, that balance?
Your life's kind of a funny analogy for what you do, though, right? That entrepreneurial aspect, right? You mentioned the idea of leaving a job, right? And leaving bureaucracy and leaving structure or whatever for flexibility, you know, and other opportunities. When, as a person who's owned a few different businesses, right, I always like to laugh, right? If you don't like your boss, quit your job as fast as you can and start your own business, because then everyone is your boss, right? Like that's not something that goes away ever. Answering to people, you change your intention, right? And now everybody else in the world is your boss, clients and employees, but you want to serve them, right? As opposed to, you know, this boss who you've decided to not like or whatever. So it's an interesting analogy, right? Because you go out on your own, you start this business. Now you have a different motivation, but you still end up creating structure. You still end up creating rules, right, that help you to be successful. And the accreditation process and all of those things really are the exact same, right? For some groups, this, you know, accreditation or some of those different processes for kind of meeting standards sound hard. They sound like a hassle. They sound like, you know, a challenge or whatever. An audit would be a nightmare type thing. But if the approach is that we're going to run our business and meet or exceed all of these standards, their life isn't harder. Life gets easier, right? With the system. And it's the other analogy you brought up is your health, right? It's much more fulfilling to just be active and feel good than to not be active and hate yourself for not feeling good all the time, right? So that's kind of an interesting analogy that you bring up, and that there's not really a question there, but kind of a curiosity to notice what you're saying.
Totally, and I'll kind of piggyback on some that you're saying there, in terms of like, you know, kind of wanting to step away from the structure that others have created and create my own that I feel like can work well for me and set others up for success. And so either, you know, we are falling within a structure or we're creating it. And the latter is more attractive to me.
Mm-hmm. I'm laughing. It made me think back, Kurt, when you gave that analogy of my oldest son came one day, and he's a teenager, right? And he's like, Mom, he says, I want to be just like you and Dad. And I'm like, what does that mean, honey? He says, I don't want to be accountable to anybody, just like you and Dad are not accountable to anybody. You know, I want my own business and I don't want to have to answer to anybody. And I'm like, oh, honey, I have so many bosses. You have no idea. You have no idea all of that accountability, just like you talked about. But it's easy to misconceive that if you have this little bit more flexible schedule, or, you know, maybe you're not working 9 to 5, maybe you're, you know, working in the morning, or, you know, take a break in the afternoon, or you work longer hours, but they don't really account for all of that, or the idea that if you don't work and make money, that when you go on vacation, there's no money, right? That money doesn't keep coming in if you're the one making the money. So it was just interesting when you're young, what you perceive and what you think's happening.
Yeah. And I would, you know, maybe push back on the multiple bosses thing. I think, you know, in some ways you can make that analogy, but there's more security in having 10 bosses than one. Because if one of them, you know, decides to change course, the other 9 are still there. So I think sometimes it can be a bit of a misconception, you know, that employment has more security than business ownership. But it takes a lot of effort, energy, and time to be able to get to the place where you have all those bosses and none of them can really tell you what to do.
And they all pay you, which is really nice, right? Because if the boss doesn't pay you, you fire them.
That is correct.
Parker, this has been kind of a fun conversation. I'm wondering, you talked about, you know, keeping people around you that help, you know, share their information and direct you. How do you think about mentorship, and are you really deliberate about that kind of a relationship?
I am. I think that, you know, part of the way that our life is meant to be lived, this is just my personal perspective, is to be mentored and to mentor. that there's an abundant amount of knowledge and wisdom to be shared between people, right? And the mentor learns from the mentee, and the mentee learns from the mentor. And there's so many folks out there in the world who have not had someone to look up to, someone to help guide them, someone to help teach them. And I believe that we all, as a basic human right, deserve to have mentorship and guidance from someone, and to have the opportunity to pass that along at some phase or stage of our life. And so the people that really, I think surround me and add a lot of value and benefit are some of the people that have been my clients, even that have been, obviously I'm a younger guy. I've been, only doing this for, close to a decade now, whereas some have been doing it for 30, 40 years. And so it's important for me to ask those questions, those challenges that I have, and to have those conversations, and then also be able to give back. I'm participate in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, and obviously there's a lot of young boys and young girls that don't have a mentor that exists in their life, and so hopefully that addresses the question, but that's more or less kind of my approach to it.
No, I like that, and to be intentional about it, I think it's really important. What's in the future for Parker?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question. I live in Phoenix. However, I still love Colorado. I'm hoping to add a second location to be able to really kind of split my time between both. I'm also working on an expansion with my business to develop a tool that's going to help organizations, simplify and organize maintaining their compliance and following the standards. And so without disclosing a whole lot about that, I've got some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pike this year that I think will solve a lot of problems around compliance. It'll make it easier to remain in compliance. And a byproduct of that is that, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of patients will be treated with, that much more of a level of respect and safety and quality. So, I'm sure you probably saw on my website, the mission of my organization is to, support the growth, development, and refinement of healthcare organizations seeking to make a positive impact in the lives of others. My vision is, a higher standard of safety and quality in healthcare. So everything that I'm doing with my company is centered around improving outcomes, improving safety, improving quality. And that really makes it easy for me to know what to do next, because it's just all about that.
Well, it's very organized, right? It's very clear, and there's a path to follow. And I love that you do that stuff, because I don't really like to do that much detail, right? I have to get away from the computer every now and then. So I appreciate what you do. And I know how hard it is, because I've worked with a lot of different consultants that do kind of the things that you do, and the detail and the organization that's required is intense. So I appreciate knowing that about you, because just what you're telling me, I know that about you and what you do. So I imagine that there's going to be, facilities and organizations that are going to recognize your gifts and abilities as well, and your hard work, and they're going to want to get a hold of you. What's the best way for them to do that?
They can email me directly, Parker at PJSconnection.com. They can visit my website. There's a contact form, www.pjsconnectionconsulting.com. I'm also easily discoverable on LinkedIn, has some of my testimonials, more about me, like you had read from my bio and my work history in the industry. And so I'm a very accessible guy, and any of those three avenues are ones that you can take to get in touch with me.
That's thank you. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for being on our show today, Parker. It's been fun.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me.
Thanks, Parker.